And even so, while their numbers in the wild are dwindling, this animal continues to be probably the most respected predator in the world. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you all is another of our closest relatives and the largest tree-dwelling animal. It is the orangutan. Now, the orangutan is in the primate family, so the same group as gorillas, chimps, gibbons, and of course humans. And they are the largest tree-dwelling animal. And of course, this one here is a male. And I can tell he's a male because he's got a very broad, almost flattened face. I mean, it almost looks like he's ran straight into a milk truck. Of course, the females actually find that very attractive. The orangutan is found in the rainforests of Borneo and Sumatra in Southeast Asia. And of course, males usually live on their own, but they will command a large territory and attract as many females as they can. But, unfortunately, orangutans are in terrible danger because of us as humans, because we are taking their young from the wild to be sold as pets to disreputable zoos for tourists to have their photos taken with, or even to circuses. But the worst is deforestation, because we are taking the ancient forests that orangutans have lived in for centuries. We are taking them away to cut and burn them down to make way for plantations, and the biggest plantation is palm oil. And palm oil is used in products that you find down your supermarkets, and they are used in food as well as products like body products, and pretty much everything palm oil is used in. And it's meant now that the demand for palm oil is bringing these orangutans' homes to the ground. And of course, but there is hope, like with conservationists working to protect orangutans, as well as making money with them from tourism. People come from all over the world to see orangutans in the wild, and also buying palm oil, eco-friendly palm oil products, like products that were made by palm oil plantations that were not involved in destroying the habitat of the orangutan. And of course, there's also WWF and also rewilding, like replanting the forests that orangutans have lived in for generations, in fact for millennia, to be able to link up the isolated populations. Now, before I move on to the animals, I'm going to show you both the people who are killing wildlife and the people who are defending the wildlife. To be precise, the poachers and anti-poachers. Poachers are people who go after animals to kill them for money, and of course what you've got to understand is that a lot of poachers, especially in places like Africa, are just very, very desperate people, and a lot of them are just come from communities riddled with poverty, disease and crime, and they don't have any money. I mean, while I do understand that people get desperate, and when you have nothing and you see this opportunity to make money to feed your family, you take it. But even so, I mean, I've been working with animals for a good part of my life, and it takes a lot to shock me and make me sick to my stomach, but just seeing what poachers will do to wildlife just makes me absolutely sick to my stomach, and just makes me see why people in third world countries like Africa and Asia have such an unpleasant reputation. But the heroes of wildlife conservation are here, anti-poaching squads, because these are the people that devote their entire lives to protecting wildlife like elephants, rhinos, leopards, tigers and pangolins. Of course, they always have to be one step ahead of the poachers, because it's basically war at the end, and a lot of rangers lose their lives to poachers every year. But if poachers are caught, they're quite often given the choice to either come quietly or just try and fight, and quite often that results in them being killed on the spot. But when poachers are caught, they're sentenced to over 50 years in jail, and of course I just think that a lot of them deserve jail, but for me it's these guys, the anti-poaching squads of Africa and Asia, that are the true heroes of wildlife conservation. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all animals that went extinct in the past because of humans. Now, the first animal is this. It is the dodo. Now, the dodo was a large flightless bird that lived on the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, where it was endemic, which means it was found there and nowhere else on Earth. And it's almost certainly the first animal species that human beings deliberately exterminated in historic times. Because the dodo was discovered in the 1600s by Dutch sailors who arrived on the island. And of course, the dodo had never seen a human being before, and it had never had any natural predators, so it was more inquisitive and curious than it was stupid. And of course, originally the dodo was hunted for food, but it has been proven that dodo was actually quite disgusting. But the dodos whose home, like the forests they lived in, were probably cut down. But also the Dutch sailors brought with them dogs, cats, foxes, rats, badgers and weasels. And of course the dodo was flightless and it nested on the ground, and the rats and weasels plundered their nests and ate their eggs. And of course the adult dodos had no natural predators, and in less than 100 years after their discovery, the dodo just completely disappeared from the world. Now, the dodo has always been described as a squat, dumpy bird, but from studying where its legs join its pelvis, we know it actually stood more upright. Its feathers were probably a lot more fluffy, but also we now know that it was related to the pigeon, so it probably gave a pigeon-like call, like a sort of goo-goo, 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 that gave the bird its name. Now, these two animals are the mammoths and the mastodons. Now, mammoths and mastodons were in the same family as elephants, but unfortunately, because they roamed the ice ages, during the ice ages, and it was only about just over 10,000 years ago that these animals died out. And why they died out has always been open to scientific debate. In fact, many scientists believe that it was climate change, when the warming of the climate just meant that the ice fields they lived on disappeared and they couldn't adapt properly. But I believe that, well, with many scientists, it was actually early humans, because mammoths and mastodons were hunted by early humans for their meat, their bones, their fur and their tusks. I mean, it might have been a combination of both, but the most horrifying bit is they didn't know, the humans didn't know any better, and we just do not learn from our past mistakes. And of course, this right here is the animal that has probably fascinated me more than any other extinct animal. It is Aepyornis maximus, also known as the elephant bird. Now, the elephant bird was the largest bird that has ever lived, and when I say the largest, I mean it could stand well over 3 meters tall, weighed more than half a ton, and it was big. It laid the biggest eggs that have ever been discovered. And of course, it lived on the island of Madagascar, where it was endemic, found there and nowhere else on Earth. But, I mean, why they went extinct is quite often scientific debate. I mean, it might have been climate change, where a lot of their swampy forest habitat was turned into desert. It could have been that when human settlers arrived, that they cut down a lot of the forests they browsed in, because the elephant bird was a herbivore, so it fed on plants and fruit. It may have been hunted, but of course we all know that a modern-day ostrich has a kick that's powerful enough to rip open a man's stomach, so I'm pretty sure a kick from a fully grown elephant bird would have been able to kill a human being outright. But of course, but they might have hunted juvenile elephant birds. Of course, it might have also been the poaching of their eggs, which might have been a great source of nourishment and nutrition. But it also might have been when humans brought chickens over to Madagascar. They brought with them diseases that the elephant bird wasn't immune to. But around the 17th century, this animal completely disappeared. Now, the next animal is actually 2 in 1. These are the moas. Now, the moas were native to New Zealand, and they were the tallest birds that have ever lived. They could stand about 3 meters tall, so they weren't as big as the elephant bird, but this was their natural predator. It was the biggest eagle that has ever lived, Harpagornis, also known as the Haast's eagle, and of course it preyed on moas, because we know that the Haast's eagle preyed on moas because moa skeletons have been found with holes stabbed through their pelvic bones that exactly match the grip of the eagle's claws. Of course, the Maoris of New Zealand had legends of these giant birds, but it wasn't until 1839 when Professor Richard Owen, who was the curator of the Natural History Museum in London, managed to fully construct a moa skeleton and found pieces of the Harpagornis skeleton that he proved those were no myths. Although the Maoris had legends of these birds, they also might have unintentionally been responsible for the extinction of both birds, because when the moas were driven to extinction by the Maori, the Haast's eagles soon followed. But the last one is an animal that only went extinct about 90 years ago. It was the thylacine, or Tazmanian wolf, and this was the largest carnivorous marsupial, and marsupials are mammals that grow their young in a pouch on the mother's belly, and they lived in Australia for millions of years, even coexisted with the Aboriginal people. But when Europeans arrived in Australia just over 200 years ago with livestock, guns and other invasive species, they decimated much of Australia's unique wildlife, and of course the Tasmanian wolf was very heavily persecuted. In fact, this was the last known animal which died in a zoo in Tasmania in 1936. which marked a new low in our relationship with the natural world.